About 9:30 in the morning at Teller's Gallery and Bar on Broadway. This is a 50-gallon drum that I use to collect grease. It sits back in the back of the kitchen. When they filter the fryer, once they're done with the grease, they put it in the barrel for me once it cools down a little bit, and I come and change it out. They usually give me a call, let me know when it's getting close. The interior of the barrels gets varying degrees of filthiness. It is fryer grease, but I try to keep the exteriors as clean as possible just for health code and all that. Take it to the car wash, spray it down. These are great because they have a locking lid on them. There's bungs that you can undo. Sometimes when it's hot, it'll expand or contract, and that kind of helps regulate the pressure in the barrel because these lids are really tight. I use these because if they had to, they could put it on its side and roll it around in the kitchen if they had to. But just a car dolly works pretty good. And also when I'm hauling it in and out, I'm not making a mess. We keep it as tidy as we possibly can. It is a waste product, so you don't want it sloshing through the restaurant. And unfortunately, I do have to haul it through the restaurant, which is why I try to get here in the morning for this particular restaurant. But it's in the back. So you keep it back in the corner here where it's kind of out of the way. There's no food being stored anywhere near it or anything like that. Not that it's a major issue because it does lock up tight. I always check, make sure that reasonably clean inside before I set it. Water is the biggest killer for me, and this one's pretty full at this point. It's just waste grease. They keep it pretty clean for me. They kind of filter it before it goes into here, which really helps me out. Less waste for me to deal with later. But that's probably about 40 gallons right there, and I'll probably lose a gallon or two in sediment, and when I filter it, whatever comes out of it. I try to get here in the mornings, just so I'm not carting this by the patrons of the restaurant. Set it there, it's the clean one. Figure this grease weighs about, I'm guessing probably about 7 pounds to the gallon. Water's 8, grease is a little lighter, so probably between 7 and 8 pounds to the gallon. So this weighs, what, 7, about 200 pounds. And the dolly is necessary, obviously. Ratchet strap on it there. Make sure I don't spill it. Lid's on there tight. And I'm usually in and out of here in less than 5 minutes unless I talk with the owner. Again, that locking lid, that way I can tilt it. Lucked out this morning and got a place right around the corner. Sometimes I have to haul this block or two away. The vehicle I drive is a Chevy Suburban diesel. It was converted by Loki Motors down in Florida. I bought it on eBay. Went down and got it and drove it back up. It's got a secondary tank, which is directly underneath me, which holds diesel fuel. It's a 12-gallon tank. There's a switch right on the dashboard here. I got it marked grease and diesel. Right now we're burning grease, which is the primary tank, which is a 40-gallon tank. They're both accessed through the same portal on the side of the truck. I wait till the engine gets, I have a thermostat on the engine, I wait till the engine gets warmed up before I switch it to grease, and then it operates just like any diesel vehicle does. You always want to purge the engine with diesel fuel because, especially when it's cooler out, because the grease will coagulate in the engine and it is a bear to get started. It's a diesel vehicle, so it's got glow plugs, and you just need to do the basic maintenance. I use a synthetic motor oil to extend the life of the engine. A lot of people say that the grease is actually better for the engine because it lubricates the engine more. It's an engine that runs on compression. So I find that the engine actually runs quieter on the grease and doesn't seem to hurt the engine at all. The diesel engine was actually originally designed to burn on any grease as a mechanical horse for farmers. I believe it was a 1901 World's Fair that it was introduced. I have gauges here, and this is my secondary fuel. I don't know if you see that. And the other one here is actual pressure of the grease filter, which is in the back of the vehicle. It's actually inside this vehicle. A lot of them are mounted on the firewall, but there wasn't room to put it on the firewall in this particular vehicle, probably because of the air conditioner and all the extras, bells and whistles on this model. But it actually heats the grease as it goes through a filter, and then there's another filter on the firewall before it goes into the engine, and all of that is heated. There's also a coil in the primary tank that routes coolant fluid, radiator fluid through that coil and then back up to the radiator to cool the engine, and also the superfluous heat, the extra heat, helps heat that grease. So there's several times that the grease is getting heated. The hotter that grease is when it hits the engine, the better. It burns more efficiently, there's less waste, and you're not going to be gumming up your parts as much. I've not had any problems with the grease system at all. I've replaced the transmission, and I've done some other just basic maintenance to the vehicle. It was pretty well maintained when I got it. The people that owned it before me thought it was a great idea, but they didn't like getting dirty, so they never even burned grease in it. They bought a 5-gallon container of vegetable oil and put it in there once, but other than that, they just burned diesel in it. Now you can put diesel in the primary tank and go that route if you need to. If you're traveling and you can't find grease, you can put the diesel in the primary tank. I try not to do that. I try to keep it just grease, and I filter it very well before it gets into the tank, because changing the onboard filters is not as easy as it is to just filter it really well. And usually I got to change these filters every 3,000, 4,000 miles, right around there. Sometimes more frequently than that, depends on the kind of grease that I'm putting into the engine, how well I've filtered it. I do have a pump that will filter as it goes into the tank. I try not to use that because the filters are expensive, and I feel better settling it all and making sure I have that grease just as clean as can be before it goes into the tank. And that, there's fryer bits and all sorts of debris in there, animal fat, that kind of thing, that I try to clean out of the grease as much as possible before it actually goes into my tank. We're back at my shop, which is in a residential area in Columbia. This is an old house that wasn't very well built. I use it as my shop. dedicated to doing grease. Oh yeah, put all this up on platforms, try to keep it as clean as I can. You know, nobody lives in the house, so it gets a bit dirty. About once a month I come in and I move everything out and scrub it all down and keep it as clean as I can. But when I get the grease here, be it in the cubies, which are the containers that the grease originally comes in, this is waste, this is gunk, nasty stuff that I can't use, can't filter, and I eventually just take that to the landfill or pour it into a grease trap somewhere. But I usually let these drums set for a few days, and that helps let a lot of the particulate matter settle down. If there's any water, it goes to the bottom of the tank. Animal fat will kind of settle or coagulate on top, and I'm able to get rid of it. I can burn animal fat as long as it's hot, but I try to get as much of that out as possible. So I set that here, and then I have a transfer pump that once this is settled for a few days, I have a transfer pump that comes in and I put it through a sock that I actually scrape the interior of the sock. It's a 10 micron sock. Let's see if I'll grab the sock here in a second. But this is the heater that goes down. It's just a bucket heater that you buy at any farm and home store. And I put it down into the tank and I let that heat for a couple days, 3 days at tops. That's why this window's cracked open to let the smell kind of go out. But it gets the water out. It helps the particles settle better down to the bottom of this tank. I kind of call this my muck tank. When it comes out of here, I pump it out of here and I put it into this far drum, which again has a 10 micron sock on it. I'm actually transferring this one right now. It has a 10 micron sock in it that I don't scrape because I don't want to mess with the integrity of the filter. When it comes out of there, it comes down. There's 2 pumps here. One of them pumps into this, which goes to a 1 micron sock. Again, I don't scrape that sock because I want that to do as much filtering as I can. Comes out of that through the pump and goes into this tank, which has 0.5 micron socks in the top of it. When it comes out of here, it's ready to go into my fuel tank. These pumps run about 80, 90 bucks. They run on 110. They're pretty good. You don't want to run them dry a lot, which is why I have them down below and why all these tanks are up high. It just makes it easier on the pump. If it pumps dry, it'll wear the pump out faster. But it pumps it all through these socks, and that's the cheapest way to go. A lot of people use a force system and use these kind of filters, and I tried that, and it really taxed the pump. Whereas these socks, you're looking at anywhere from $5 to $7 a sock. I can filter probably 150 gallons with a system of 3 different socks. So economically it's better. These filters run anywhere from $8 to $10, and like I said, you put a lot of wear and tear on the pumps because you're forcing that grease through it. So I've stopped using those, and the socks just work. I have the space to do it. A lot of people do this outside for obvious reasons. It's kind of messy. It stinks. You don't want to do this in your home. I've seen people do it in their house. I don't know how they do it. But when it comes out of here, I can put it into the cubies, which is what the grease actually comes in. I have these metal cans that I bought again at a farm and home store. They are metal, and I fill them full of the grease so that I can travel with it when I go on vacation or go or travel around town. I can carry it in these. These are not as durable, but they're really easy to find, and I can replace them. I have stacks of them everywhere. So when it comes out of here, let's see. Right now I don't have a pump to actually get it into my tank outside. That's my next thing. You know, I could buy a pump that'll actually tell me how many gallons are going through it, and it'll have like you would have at any gas station. You know, just a nozzle that you have a trigger on and all that. So right now I'm kind of doing this the hard way by I just drain it directly into these, and that kind of tells me how many gallons I'm going through. And when it comes out of here, it is clean and ready to go into my tank. This is pretty full. I leave this up a little bit so that if I missed anything, sediment, you know, this will sit here for, nowadays I have enough people that are letting me get grease from their restaurants that I'm able to keep this full pretty much. So any of the sediment or water that I might have missed is down in the bottom here, and this is up a little bit higher so that I don't get it into my finished tank. And periodically, I just have to drain everything out of this tank and kind of, I don't need to clean it per se, I just need to get any sediment that's in there out. But I'm able to put it in these containers, and then I actually pour it with a funnel into my truck, which isn't the easiest way to do it, but it works for traveling and all that. And then I just store my extra grease here. But as you see, it comes out of here, and it's pretty clean when it comes out of here. I mean, it's probably not something you want to. You could heat it up and fry your fries or whatever you wanted to in there, but it's traveled a fair distance by the time it gets here. I'll just put that on there. And these are all fittings that you can buy at any hardware store, and this is just my system. I've looked on YouTube a lot and seen what other people do, and I've kind of come up with this hybrid that works for me, and I have the space to do it in. Water's my killer. Water's what really gets me, which is why that bucket heater, it evaporates most of the water before it gets in there. I do have, this is insulated, and I have a heat tape that I can plug into it, especially when it's cold outside. It doesn't flow as well, so I'm able to heat this up, and also it'll hopefully evaporate any other water that might have made it to this stage of the filtering process. And also it'll flow better when I go to put it in my engine. That's more important when the colder months, when I need to get it into the engine and I want it to be warmed up already so that I can switch to grease quicker, because it takes a little while for that engine to heat up in the winter. And you know, I have to plug it in. It's a basic diesel. You have to plug it in to keep it warm and keep the glow plugs going. So this is evaporating right now. These are full. At any one time, I probably have about 150 gallons of grease, which enables me to go at about 12 miles a gallon, which is about what my vehicle gets. That enables me to go just about anywhere I want, and back with having to burn a minimal amount of petroleum. I wish you could smell. It smells like whatever restaurant I'm getting from. I get from several different restaurants in town, and it's kind of funny because people will say, it was like, oh, it smells like wings. Well, that's where I get from one place, or they smell, say it smells like chips. Well, that's that's another restaurant I get it from. So you always know what I'm burning when I drive by. But I have all the pumps set up on switches. Once it gets to this point and I get into here, it's pretty clean. I'm able to just flip switches, they're just household switches that I've rigged up to the pumps that are down here, so that I don't even have to get dirty until I start changing out the bag filters. And let me get a bag filter and show you. This is a 0.5 micron bag filter. It's basically, it's a glorified coffee filter. It's spun polyester, and it has a tag that says 0.5. The other ones are 10 or 1 micron. I get the bigger ones that come down to about here, so there's more surface area to filter on the 10 microns, because I'm pushing more gunk through them. But these 0.5s, because of the height I have this at and all that, it's much easier to pull these out once they start getting clogged up. And like I said, I don't scrape the sides of these like I do my primary filter, because it impedes the integrity of the filter. And I wanted this to be as clean as it possibly can be once I put it into the tank. Okay, how I fuel the vehicle at the moment is, since I don't have a pump that pumps outside, I just have it in these cubies or containers, and I use a funnel and actually pour it into the tank. Now the tank has two different inlets here. This one is for grease, and then I use the galvanized one here for diesel fuel. Now the diesel fuel, there's a secondary tank that's actually underneath the driver's side, and it's a 12-gallon tank. So it fills there, and then the primary tank, which is a 40-gallon tank, the original tank, is directly underneath the back of the vehicle here. So to fill up, I do this pretty much the old school way, and I just pour it into the tank. Now this isn't something you want to do. This isn't really something you do if you're afraid of getting dirty. You're bound to get grease on you. I'm wearing my older work clothes and shoes because I don't want all my laundry to smell like grease, and it definitely has an odor, my wife tells me. By the time all is said and done, filters, time, and all that, I figured I'm paying probably about $1 a gallon for the grease, which is, of course, cheaper than, especially with a fluctuating market, is cheaper. So economically, it's not a bad thing if you're willing to get dirty and do the work. But I'm also I'm not burning petroleum as much as I would be otherwise. I've had several different trucks, and most of them this is the first diesel I've ever owned. The reason why I got this, I already got it converted. Like I said, I bought it on eBay, so I was able to get it for a reasonable price. Fortunately, my bank was willing to work with me and kind of saw my vision of saving money and fuel, and just being more environmentally conscious. I'm burning a waste product, which is great. I have heard of people that actually burn motor oil in a diesel vehicle and get really good mileage doing it. Now, I wouldn't want to mess with that. This is about the extent of how filthy and nasty I want to get. Whereas the motor oil, you can only imagine what's in that and what they have to filter out in order to get to this point where they can put it in their tank. Now, the truck itself is a basic diesel, standard diesel vehicle. It's just been converted with the coil in it and all that. The filter that comes out of the tank right here. These are the filters that actually go into it, and you pop this up and it slides down in there. It has a heater on it. You can feel it. It's really hot right now because I just turned the vehicle off, but it's got a heater in it, and then the grease comes in, goes through the filter, comes back out. This is a catch trap where if I miss anything or water, it'll help separate. I can go 3,000 or more miles before I have to change this out. The grease also goes through the firewall filter, which is part of the original vehicle. The secondary tank, it comes up through there and goes all the way to the engine. This is the fuse here, superfluous fuse, or an extra fuse put on that runs the heater. It burns out every while. That's why you see my jerry rigging there. This burns out every now and then. It draws a fair amount of juice, and the fuses burn out somewhat frequently, so I have to change those. This is the firewall filter right here. That is part of the vehicle. Both the diesel and the grease go through that, whereas that rear filter, only the grease goes through there. Now, this is the heating coil that it goes through the radiator and cools the engine, and before it goes to the radiator, it actually goes back into the coil that's in the original tank, which is just a spiral of copper that it runs through to help heat that grease before it comes up and actually comes into the engine. I just started learning this a few years back and have been planning on replacing my truck. Events transpired to move me a little quicker to changing my vehicle out, and this came up on eBay. It was a price that I could afford, and the bank was willing to give me a loan, and it was already converted, and I was able to burn grease all the way up here, even through just loose internet connections. I made connections all the way up and was able to fill up my tank as I went, as I came up from southern Florida all the way up to Missouri, and I burned maybe 10 gallons of diesel the entire way, and all the rest was grease. And it was just this loose connection of people that are doing the same thing, that actually had filtered grease and were willing to help me out as I got my vehicle up here. It's kind of funny because a lot of times I'll leave the engine running because I don't want to purge with diesel, and if I'm only going to be in a place like running into a store or something for 10-15 minutes, I don't want to purge it with diesel and then have to restart it, and diesel engines are made to just run. So people kind of give me a hard time saying, "Oh, you're just wasting gasoline and just burning it into the air." And then when I tell them, it's like, well, actually, I'm using used fryer oil and I'm burning that, so I'm carbon neutral. They seem to smile and think that's pretty neat. It's becoming more and more popular. Getting grease is becoming more and more difficult. I'm fortunate to have worked in the restaurant trade, and I have friends in the trade that have been allowing me to collect grease at their restaurants. For a while, I was drawing it out of dumpsters, and that's, people use those grease dumpsters like trash cans, and they're really not. People pour motor oil in there. It's not what they're for. They're for grease. Water gets into them because they don't put the lids back on them, and there's a whole host of problems with the stuff that's not grease getting into your motor. The thing that kills a diesel engine more than anything is water and sediment, particles in your fuel. This has a water separator and all that, just like any other diesel vehicle, but you can overload it and tax it. So I'm very careful about what I put into the tank. When I first started, I wasn't as careful, and I had a lot of problems with changing filters. My tank I had to clean out. I had to siphon everything out of the tank, and my learning curve was pretty quick, because you do that once or twice and you don't want to do it again. It's really kind of a pain in the bum. So a lot of my motivations for doing the Greasel is political to some extent. The oil companies are making record profits and destroying our environment and contaminating our food sources and water, and there's so many vehicles in this country, especially that are wasteful and consume a lot of petroleum products. And I have 2 kids, and I kind of see this as a way to do a small, albeit small, part in helping our environment and helping reduce our dependency on foreign oil, which every politician talks about and few actually do much about. And I just see this as one way that I can help out in that respect. And also, I am saving some money on fuel because of the size of vehicle I drive, and it helps my own guilt driving such a large vehicle, because I know I'm not burning up fossil fuels at a record rate. 12 miles a gallon is not good miles per gallon. And burning this grease instead of, it's considered carbon neutral, and I'm using a product that's grown here in the United States. It's a waste material after it's used for its original purpose, and I can continue to move on down the highway.